always confuse us from the back.
Uh-huh.
That might be the back.
Googler. Noogler.
Oh. Back.
Thanks. I'll try to have a good show. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Let me just get set up here. Our nickname has been changed in the chat room. Isn't that fun? All right. It's a little better. All right. Let's get the show started. Fade, overlay. Nope, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. Hold on. Nope, that didn't work. I don't know how to get this logo. I love the TheOneRing, but I don't like it over my face. To the magic of storytelling. There we go. Hello everybody, welcome to TheOneRing.net Torn Tuesday. I'm Justin. Let me get my hat on. It is a very hot, it's 110 degrees here in Los Angeles, in the middle of Hollywood. We're at Meltdown Comics, home of all things geek, 10,000 square foot comic book store. You've never seen anything like it. If you're ever in LA, make it a stop to come by Meltdown Comics. You can see where the TheOneRing does their show, does our show. You can see where all the TheOneRing t-shirts are made. And of course, this is also the home of Nerdist. And just on the other side of this wall over here, there's a podcast being recorded right now with Kumail Nanjiani, and it is called The Indoor Kids with his wife Emily. She's huge on Twitter. She's great. She's got a good Tumblr too. So look up Kumail and Emily because they're worth following on Twitter. They're pretty funny. You might know Kumail from Silicon Valley, and of course the Meltdown has its own show on Comedy Central every Wednesday night. So we've got a lot of people in the chat room. Hello everybody, TF Drums. That color is offensive. Thank you, Rocket Hobbit.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, he decides to show up.
They kept me at work until 4 o'clock.
3 minutes.
They kept me at work very late, and I could barely get here. Well, Los Angeles does have a thing called traffic, you know.
Yeah, you don't even drive. That doesn't affect you.
We did today. I had to get a ride to get here on time.
Speaking of dead things.
I know. How about that?
This thing's dead.
But it mentions the little film that we're going to talk about today.
That's right.
Full of surprises, aren't we?
What do you mean? We have these wonderful Lake Town Luau shirts available at our Lake Town Luau party at San Diego Comic-Con. And it was quite wonderful.
Quite the
and
party.
As Cliff sits down, this is what I want to show you.
Benedict.
This is what was released yesterday. At least that's part of it. And we're gonna go through the scroll because we saw this at San Diego Comic-Con. They projected it, or they didn't project it. It was on these big giant screens. And that was only half of the scroll that they had at Comic-Con.
They had a wraparound screen. Didn't they design it new this year?
Yeah, and half of the screen was this, and the other half of the screen was a scroll based on the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. So they've actually made scrolls for all 6 Middle-earth movies. And who knows when we will get to see those.
Scrolls for all 3 Hobbit films, but not all 6 Middle-earth films.
All 6 Middle-earth films. Weren't you in Hall H at Comic-Con?
No, I did not go inside Hall H because
so we got a lot to talk about.
We were busy hosting the Lake Town Luau, which was an excellent party. And by the time we finished our big party, they had cut off the entrance line for Hall H.
So look at this. This is they've conveniently edited this whole scroll into iPhone wallpaper sized segments. It's the first time they've ever done that. The other times, the other scrolls that were pretty wide, they were good for desktop wallpaper. But this is the first scroll that felt a little more crunched because everything was made for iPhone wallpaper. And so this was the first one. Of course, you see Bilbo and Gandalf on a mountainside with a bunch of orcs below and a bunch of bats above. Now we started debating today who are the 5 armies, because bats and eagles are not part of the 5 armies, or they're not armies unto themselves.
This is something that is quite often debated among Tolkien fans and scholars. It's debated because it is unclear since 1937 whether or not the 5 armies were obviously dwarves, men, elves, and goblins. But the 5th army, sometimes they say it's the wargs, as if the wargs as a nation were there with the accompaniment of the goblins.
Seen that.
And other people argue and say that the orcs and the wargs, they count as one army, and the eagles actually were army number 5. So
bats are not an army unto themselves.
Never were, never even part of the conversation. Usually the contention is trying to figure out whether it was the wargs or the eagles who qualifies that fifth army.
Why do we see bats in the scroll and not anything else?
Because we see bats in An Unexpected Journey chasing Radagast away from Dol Guldur, and they
don't.
Yes, we do, quite visibly. And that's the first time we see the bunny sled.
In the there's bats? No, those are spiders.
The giant bats are chasing Radagast outside of Dol Guldur.
I've seen that movie many times, and I don't remember bats, I remember spiders. That's how forgetful.
Indeed, you are forgetful, sir. But
does anybody else remember that there's bats?
With the crisp sobriety of my excellent memory, I will provide you what you need to know.
There's really bats.
There are bats, and because
I don't believe it.
Because there is a visual motif of bats in Dol Guldur, we're seeing them again as a presence in the Battle of 5 Armies.
Hey, Gothy, do you remember bats? Does anyone else remember the bats? Because I don't remember the bats. If my memory's going bad, but were they memorable? I just remember the spiders.
Yes, there were bats. There were lots of bats. And after the Nazgul spirit makes that half-assed attempt to attack Radagast out of its statue, Radagast is fleeing for his life in the next shot, being chased by bats.
Oh, those were all bats?
Yes, they were bats.
Oh, I thought... Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, there were so many bats, it made it dark.
Okay.
The bats came in just before Radagast... Yes, that's right, Smaug the dragon.
Does he even call it out? Just say, oh, bats.
The last thing that you see before Radagast finishes his weird memory flashback and we come back to Gandalf and Radagast standing in the troll shaws, that's, the crazy bats flying at the camera.
Okay, other nitpicky. Why is Gandalf battling next to Bilbo? Is anything in this shot in the book?
Nothing. Well, no, nothing.
Nothing in this shot is in the book. The bats are not an army. Gandalf's not fighting, and Bilbo's not awake.
That's funny. No, a lot of these things in this particular shot are indeed in the story. There's an army. There's flames and destruction. Bilbo may or may not have cut out of the battle because he doesn't have his ring on yet. And Gandalf is a presence at the Battle of the 5 Armies, most definitely.
He is a presence.
But the bats are described by Tolkien in the book as well.
I don't know about that. This one again is tells you a lot about the fate of Thorin. He is sitting depressed on his broken throne. Who knows how the throne gets broken? And Bilbo is
it was
there.
Smashed like that when the dragon attacked 60 years earlier,
maybe,
or however long it was. And I don't know if that's depressed Thorin. That is Thorin suffering from gold madness, I think.
And
perhaps.
if you notice, look here, Bilbo's left-handed. Bilbo's left-handed. Bilbo's left-handed. Bilbo's left-handed. Bilbo's left-handed. Bilbo's left-handed. When did he become left-handed?
Since they took those pictures and reversed them in Photoshop.
Both of them?
They reversed those pictures in Photoshop. That's the only reason.
Why would they
'Cause
do that?
In the other films, you'll see Martin Freeman carrying Sting in his right hand.
What? But what? Like, see, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the care and delicacy that the original Lord of the Rings films had. It was on screen. The care, the expertise. I mean, even when we talk with Jim Rigel, the visual effects supervisor, he said like there was so much care put into every shot. Like decisions were made at every level to make this to make Lord of the Rings really, really, really special.
Yeah, but
this is sloppy.
Sloppy marketing images.
This is sloppy.
Marketing images that are haphazardly put together is not an immediate indictment against the visual effects work that the filmmakers are making. The marketing team and the filmmaking team are often not the same people, my dear boy, and they're often separate worlds apart.
You know, and a lot of
in
people,
what they're trying to do.
And we shouldn't be making a big deal about this anyway, because they even did that in the film of Return of the King. King Theoden is left-handed. Theoden grabs his sword when he is cured in the Two Towers. He grabbed his sword with his left hand. Theoden is left-handed throughout all the films until he gives his epic speech at the end of Return of the King, and he clashes the swords with his army.
Yes.
And he's riding toward camera. Yeah, he's right-handed then.
Well, that's because he was riding in that particular direction with the armies on his right-hand side.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
That's all.
So
And yes, Jeffrey, I agree with Jeffrey Lindsay's point, because composition was greater than continuity in this case.
Okay, so flip that composition. It's super simple. Just take the whole composition and flip it.
Well,
and problem solved.
There you go.
Total problem solved. And if you take this composition and flip it, problem solved. Everything solved.
You'd think.
So they could do it. It's a curious thing. Now, Bilbo shows up twice, as we just saw, and so does Thorin. Look, Thorin 2, Thorin 1. Sad Thorin, angry Thorin. Sad Thorin, angry Thorin. So
funny. And there's Fili and Kili, while the other dwarves do not get presents at all.
Someone pointed out that this is the first marketing image where Fili is looking at the camera.
Really?
Yeah. Every other time, Fili's not looking at the camera.
Really?
Yeah, and just to remind everybody, if you're just joining us, Torn Tuesday, you can text us at the hotline, 530-64-FRODO. We'll get your text message, and we'd love to hear from you.
Are we continuing after our review of this wonderful banner? Are we continuing to our discussion of the early adaptation?
Maybe. Can we speak about
the answer
Fili's
is maybe.
Final moment in the spotlight? Is that his final moment?
Well, Rocket, it seems that this little panel that we're looking at is an emphasis on the characters that we know die in the book. Thorin, Fili, and Kili. So that's pretty much,
And there's a white orc in the back.
Is there? Yes, there is.
And Azog.
Azog is hiding in the background.
So I guess Bolg does die.
Perhaps Azog is looking a bit more conspicuous than usual because he has not been used in any of the marketing ads.
Do you think Azog becomes Gothmog through some trickery of Mordor?
No, not that I know of. That sounds like a very strange concept. No, I think that Gothmog is a unique individual, and
Gothmog speaks English.
And Gothmog is and he's not as tall as Azog. Azog is going to meet his ultimate doom, I believe.
Okay,
let's take a look.
All those characters,
and then there's Smaug himself.
Speaking of people that take a fall, Smaug's got to die in the first 20 minutes. All these rumors of like Smaug being the opening scene. Do you think Smaug will die before Battle of the Five Armies title comes on screen?
No, I think that everything I've been hearing is that the Battle of Dol Guldur and Gandalf's rescue will be, at the front of the film. An additional thought comes to me now. about the running time. Didn't we get some kind of a news story from some European agency that was doing certification, a ratings certificate on the version of Battle of the Five Armies? And I believe the running time comes in at only 1 or 2 minutes longer than Desolation of Smaug, which we know was 2 hours and 14. The shortest of all the Middle-earth movies, Desolation of Smaug. Battle of the Five Armies seems to be barely a couple of minutes longer. Barely. So don't expect a 3-hour, or like The Return of the King, a 3-hour, 20-minute crazy opus. Just expect things to be wrapped up rather quickly.
Yeah.
2 hours, 17 minutes is what we're going to expect.
Scaly dragon butt? Is that what you're saying? Scaly dragon butt?
From Battle of Five Armies.
Now, is
BOT-5A.
Bard holding a bow, or is he holding the arrow?
I cannot see from here.
That's
Perhaps I should load it up on my screen.
That's what people were debating.
Maybe I should load it up on my screen. According to my iPhone screen, I don't even have it. The only one that really interests me is this one. I mean... cute. No. I see what kind of mischief you have in store. This is the one that interests me the most. Let's show this one. If it's true...
Let's see.
If it's true that the Battle of Dol Guldur will be the opening prologue, then this is the one piece of the banner.
But that becomes, in the banner, that comes after the fall of Lake Town.
This is just so fantastic. Look at this. Look at the destruction, the smoke. It looks as if Jim Rigel all of a sudden got his wish. More smoke.
More smoke.
More smoke.
It's like they're
more
listening
haze.
to him. They saw us.
They must have saw our live show and then realized, oh, sugar. We really do need to add more smoke.
A text message says the runtime only gives Peter Jackson enough time to do 2 or 3 endings, and that's not enough for him. I love it.
But who's that? Who's that? The Battle of Dol Guldur, and this scene of wonderful, extraordinary Lady Galadriel reaching out for Gandalf, and there in the background, in full battle armor, Elrond.
Elrond is in there.
Elrond half-elven, the Lord of Imladris.
Sword
and
wielding.
Behind him, like Christopher Lee has promised, there's more of me in this film, much more of me, as he has said about reprising the role of Saruman of the White, before he becomes a traitor to the free peoples of Middle-earth.
And that's
exciting.
That's meant to keep the surprise. We don't think that he will betray anything or anyone in this movie because they want to keep the Fellowship of the Ring betrayal a surprise.
I think that Saruman may have something in there that shows that he's taking an interest in looking for something in particular, maybe a ring, or maybe something suspicious. But we'll see. We'll see about that.
Really?
I do expect that. But we'll have to wait and see.
You think he'll start the thing now?
Yes, I do.
This is like the best part of the scroll. I mean, this is exactly what we want out of Lord of the Rings. Characters we care about, atmosphere that puts them in the right mood. There's a story being told here. There's a story being told here.
Yes, indeed there is.
That's not been told there, or there, or there, or there. Like, there's a little bit of story, but
most particularly, there's a story being told visually, with Peter Jackson's amazing amount of resources at his disposal, and this is a bit of film, Middle-earth film, that has never been adapted. It's from the appendix.
Yes.
We have never seen this scene of the Istari fighting and Noldor, 7,000-year-old Noldorin elf woman fighting at Dol Guldur. This has never been depicted in any adaptation or any animation ever made, which we're going to get to soon. I'm fascinated by this. I really want to see this.
Looks like Michelangelo's scene. There's some debate starting to happen, and this is an interesting thing that I don't know if the Mary Sue has picked up on it, but there's been a lot of conversation about recently this year, but most recently about fangirls and treating female characters equally, and so there's been a lot of debate here that the female elf
Tauriel, you mean?
No, the female wizard.
The female wizard?
Who's Galadriel?
She's not a wizard.
She's an elf.
Yes, the female
Why
elf.
You got me mixed up when you questioned it.
When you said the female elf without saying Lady Galadriel, I thought you meant the other one.
There's two of them, all right?
Yeah, I thought you meant the other one.
Why? She's supposed to be the most powerful.
Galadriel?
Of Saruman, of Gandalf, of Elrond. Isn't she supposed to be the most powerful?
Not necessarily.
Of equal standing at the highest level.
She's a different race because she is one of the firstborn of Iluvatar. She's an elf.
Yep.
And they are temporary mortal embodiments of Maiar spirits. Maybe it's safer to say that the wizards are more powerful than she is, but they are not, given over to showing their power openly against the enemy because they were forbidden from doing that.
The point is, why is she on the ground? She is lowest in the frame. She is below it from a compositional standpoint. The one female character, the one powerful female character, is lower than everybody else. They even put a dying Gandalf, or whatever you want to call it. They even put a dying Gandalf on a third step, so he's higher in elevation. There's something about this, and then that goes to the next thing. If she's the lowest in the frame, there's no reason to put her on the ground like that. But the only female powerful, the only two female characters are both on the ground. They're just sitting there on the ground, and every other character gets to stand. And so there's a lot of and this plays into the mind of there's been a lot of conversation recently on blogs.
I don't see the significance of this or the placement of the female elves in these compositions.
The female.
I see it.
She's on the ground. She's lowest in the frame, and then every other hero character in this thing is basically standing or sitting on a throne. And here's Tauriel, which we'll get into the Photoshop hack job that they did in the first place, but she's on the ground. She's on her knees. So of all the characters, why did they have to put the two women characters on the ground on their knees? Kind of like there's a subconscious psychological thing that's happening. And this is one of the things that we started to discover as we pursue this fangirls thing, is that there's a lot of controversy around portraying women and heroes that girls can look up to. And here's this thing with the girls, the only two girls, they're on the ground, and they're lower across the whole thing. They're lower than all other characters.
I don't see it, and I don't see. You don't even see, but the upper torso of Cate Blanchett.
And
you don't know
her head.
You don't know if she's on her knees.
She's lower. The fact is, she's on her belly. She's lower.
So.
And Tauriel is lower in the frame than everybody else. She's on her knees. And this Tauriel.
What if she's standing against a parapet? What if she's just standing against a battlement? Tauriel. It is not apparent.
No, she's on it.
She is not on her knees. It is not clear that she's on her knees.
It's totally. Look at the whole thing.
I don't even see the point. I really do not see the significance or the impact of. And I know what you're talking about in the overall point about the way primary female characters in science fiction and fantasy, how they're portrayed and how they're given, the rear end shot for, effect. Look at the shots of Scarlett Johansson in the Avengers and in the Captain America, the Winter Soldier advertising campaign. It's always a butt shot, looking at Scarlett's behind. I get that. I get the overall point.
Right.
But I don't see that it applies to this at all. Let's just move on and let's get to the Ralph Bakshi film. Shall we?
First, I just want to complete this thought. This is a Photoshop botch job. Those her hips aren't sitting on her legs. Her waist is not sitting on her hips. Her hips are not sitting on their legs.
Really?
And her face doesn't even look like Evangeline Lilly. Look, Evangeline Lilly as an elf does not look like that. She looks like her cheeks look like she just got home from the dentist. Like, her face is not in the right spot on that Photoshop. It just doesn't look like Evangeline Lilly.
It does look a little bit different, but, with shadows and...
No, there's no trickery of shadows and everything.
You don't...
Because all of these character keywords, it's the same thing if you go back to Bilbo. Look at Bilbo. That is not the 43-year-old Martin Freeman that we know. And Bilbo is supposed to be 51, is he not?
Yes, that's about right.
Okay, so Bilbo's supposed to be 51. Martin Freeman's actually 43. That is a Photoshop job and a half. I've seen I've seen better work on magazine covers. Why do they feel that they have to Photoshop the heck out of these faces? Because it's not just Toriel, it's Bilbo. And the worst case scenario for Bilbo was last year's Desolation of Smaug poster, where he just didn't even look like himself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just took away his face. And that's what happened. That's what I feel is happening here with Toriel. Like, someone took Photoshop and was just, and like, her face is gone. Her features, her elvish features with the high cheekbones and the narrow chin, like, it's all wrong.
You think so?
They're not even... Someone just texted us asking us, are they transitioning Bilbo's face to the Ian Holmes slightly?
That's an idea.
They're not.
I've never thought of that idea
They're
before.
actually going in reverse.
Oh, really?
They're actually going in reverse. If you look at all the Photoshops and all the posters of Bilbo from the first movie to the last movie, he's got more and more Photoshop work done. They're trying... It looks like they're trying to imply that the possession of the ring has made him younger. But... that's not what the ring does. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the ring only prolongs life. It doesn't make you younger. It's not a fountain of youth that erases the wrinkles.
That is true.
But that's true. But that's what they're implying with all this Bilbo Photoshop job.
Well,
see, we've got text messages.
We've seen
Bilbo looks fine, but Toriel does look a bit funky. I think you meant to say funky.
Funky.
But so after much that we're debating this internally at the TheOneRing, we got tons of volunteer editors and stuff like that. So you know what? I put it to Twitter. I said, "Is something wrong with Toriel? What does she look like?" And Twitter hashtag Toriel looks like. That's it. One word.
Is that what you did?
Hashtag Toriel looks like. And so I took the most popular, the most retweeted comments.
Yes.
And we decided to Photoshop their faces on there.
Okay.
So the first reaction people had, even in our email chain amongst all of the editors of the TheOneRing, like Toriel looks like in Photoshop with that Photoshop job. The first reaction people said she looks like Annie Lennox. So I put Annie Lennox's face
on
Toriel, and it works. It kind of works. That's Annie Lennox's face on Toriel.
That is nice,
and it looks
nice job.
normal. And then so other people chimed in and said, you know what? With her puffy cheeks, she kind of looks like Kim Kardashian or Ellen Page.
Oh gosh, no!
Look at that, Ellen Page. And as soon as I just put the face on. That's all. I put Ellen Page's face on Toriel, and it fit perfectly. And then someone said, she looks like Kim Kardashian. So I put Kim Kardashian's face.
No.
And it works.
No.
She looks just like Toriel.
Oh, no. Oh, no. You're killing me, Justin, says Eravandi.
This is crazy. That's Toriel, Kim Kardashian as Toriel. Like, if Warner Brothers is going to Photoshop Toriel, you might as well go all in. So
she just looks like she's got dirt on her face. I don't.
No,
see
but
anything.
her face and cheeks are completely wrong. And a couple people on Twitter said she kind of looked like Belle. So I put Belle from Beauty and the Beast on there. I thought that was fun.
Oh gosh.
So we had a little bit of fun. But
that's hysterical. Look at all those little photoshops you did. Very funny.
So
very funny.
But if you like Annie Lennox, but look at this. This is Toriel. It doesn't look like Toriel. And
she does look a little different.
She does look. you're telling me you're looking at it close on your phone right now.
I am looking at it very close.
Does she look like the Evangeline Lilly that we just saw at Comic-Con just a month ago?
And I can see by the close-up that she is depicted here, braced against the rock, on her knees, ready to... Well, it looks like she's ready to, go into the next round of battle.
Her cheeks are so big, puffy. Look at that. It's like, is the king's foil poison to her? Like, is she having an allergic reaction to king's foil after she blessed it?
Hysterical.
Like, that doesn't look like the Evangeline Lilly.
Well,
her eyes look different. Her cheeks look red. Her lips look fuller. They just... Am I just crazy here? I can't be crazy because everybody online seems to see it.
Well, I gotta say it looks a little bit different, but it almost looks like do you know what it kind of looks like to me?
Elf is supposed to be angular and up.
It looks like her face was partly rotated to her right, and they may have corrected the eyes to make the eyes look like they were coming straight at you. And maybe that's why the placement of her face, maybe that's why the face looks different, because they did some messing around with it in Photoshop. I'm not sure.
I don't know, but
it still looks like her nose and mouth. Unmistakably, that is an Evangeline Lilly.
But it's
nose
not her
and
cheeks.
Mouth.
It's someone else's. It's Kardashian's cheeks. Ah! It's Ellen Page's cheeks.
You're so funny.
So, and of course, probably the greatest thing about this scroll was the war moose, or as people on Twitter corrected, the elk, the war elk.
Yeah, it is. The war moose comment is a joke. We know it's not a moose.
Moose is best moose.
War mooses are just our favorite joke, but we know that it's an elk.
Did you ever use mousse for your hair?
Back when I wasn't shaving my head off, yes. Yes, indeed, I was.
Shaving your head off. So, but I think that was the most interesting part of the whole thing, was like seeing the elk.
It's also interesting to see how many of these elves have long dark hair. All these elves here, with all of them with their backs to us.
Right?
It's all long, dark, raven black hair for these elves. Nobody seems to have any blonde hair except Legolas and his daddy. Those are the only blonde elves that seem to be present. How about that? Huh, funky. Yes, funky.
Yes.
So, how about that? Well, do you think it's an effective piece of marketing or not?
I think it was kind of just dropped in our lap. There was no heads up that was coming out. There was no like slow tease. You know what I like about some of the other marketing movies like Batman? Like there was a puzzle. Like fans had to cooperate together to unlock pieces of the puzzle to get the full picture, right? Or Marvel has done a couple things where like they put a piece of the picture, the piece of the scroll on this website, a piece of the scroll on that website, a piece of the scroll on that website, and then when everybody discovers it, then the whole becomes as interesting as the parts. And I feel like they just kind of dropped it in our laps, and I don't know how to feel about that. Like there was nothing. There wasn't much to do.
Ooh, now we just got a tweet from our good buddy and longtime supporter of our show, Retro Boy. He said that if you look at that Dol Guldur segment,
hold on, getting there.
He says it looks like a side view of a face in the clouds there. Do you see it?
Dol Guldur.
Yeah. Do you see a side view of a face in the clouds? I wonder. Now I'm going to take a closer look at this image, since I have it right here. Oh, sorry, I need to squeeze past here. What do you think? What do you think, folks? A side view of a face in the cloud. There might be some kind of strange, ghostly face somewhere in that. I'm not sure. It's a pirate. Yeah, there's a pirate face hiding in that. That's very funny. You guys are so funny. TF Drum says to step away from the old Toby, Justin. You've had too much.
I don't even smoke it. I'm just looking. Maybe I'm seeing too much in all this, but I guess I don't know.
Can you see Sauron's spiked helmet?
No,
Look
I
at
don't know about
always
that.
looking for surprises.
People are looking for it. Maybe you see what you want to see.
I'm just so thrilled to have more.
Why is the
Christopher
rum
Lee.
always gone? Why is the rum always gone? I love it.
But where has all the rum gone? That's the great
I
follow-up
love
question.
it.
Oh, yes. No, it looks more like
I
Caesar.
see it. A pirate.
That's so funny.
I do not see a face.
Well,
Switching gears,
he's holding the black arrow.
he's holding the arrow.
He's holding the black arrow.
Okay. Hopefully it hits its target.
That's what Bard is holding.
Do you think he's going to throw it like a javelin?
Without having access to the wind lance, he might have to. The building is in the shape of Sauron's helmet. Yeah, there's some design elements in Dol Guldur that are very Sauronish.
Sauronish.
Sauronish, to say it any better. There you go. So, here we go. An interesting surprise bit of marketing. And that little banner, or what you call the scroll,
Yes.
the scroll leads me to the next discussion. There were scrolls also created for the other 3 Lord of the Rings films, yes?
Yes.
All right, fascinating.
Yeah, but we only saw them in Hall H.
When will they be released, I wonder?
I don't know. Sure would like to see the other scrolls because they were better than this one. I can tell you that.
Really? I
Yeah.
would love to see it. Well, let's take a moment to go back in time. Shall we step into the vintage time machine, taking us back to a vintage time when our Gandalf the White rode into the Battle of Helm's Deep looking like this. Anybody remember? Back in 1978.
No, this movie gave me nightmares, so I didn't.
This
watch
movie,
it.
this is a small little bit from the triumphant final scene, if you want to call it that, of Ralph Bakshi, the director, who animated amazing films like Wizards and American Pop and another famous disaster,
Oh, look, it's God.
Cool World. Yeah,
Lowercase g
He looks-
says Rocket Hobbit.
this Gandalf the White definitely looks like the tweet of God.
Aravandi says I wasn't born in 1978, and guess what? Neither was I. So of course I didn't see this.
Yeah, you
Because
didn't.
by the time I was of age to appreciate Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, it looked old.
Back to Bakshi. Yes, we are. We are
Because-
back to Bakshi.
I really wish Don Bluth would have done a Hobbit film.
That would have been interesting.
I think Don Bluth could do a really good.
He could have. He was busy making a classic, The Secret of Nim.
Secret of Nim and All Dogs Go to Heaven and An American Tale.
An American Tale, great classics.
And didn't he do Thumbelina or something like that?
He did. He did a great film called Anastasia.
Anastasia.
And he did a film that almost destroyed 20th Century Fox. It was called Titan AE.
Titan AE. That's
Titan
right.
AE, which
and
almost destroyed Fox
And
Studios.
before he went
It was such a disaster.
and before he went solo as Don Bluth, before American Tale and before A Secret of Nim, he was actually at Disney and he worked on my favorite film, Robin Hood.
Right, he did. He worked on Robin Hood.
Robin Hood and Little John running
Through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other has to say. So, the history of animation in America includes some of the great big obvious things like the Disney studios and all the stuff that they produced for many, many decades. But there was also what you'd call what's the word I'm looking for? A subversive element in American animation. Primarily, it came from Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi, yes. He is the guy who is most notorious for directing the X-rated film Fritz the Cat, which was the very first time any animated film had gotten slapped with an X rating, and you can imagine why. Also notorious for doing films like Heavy Traffic or Coonskin, Ralph Bakshi had the most unbelievable violence, drug use, experimental drugs, very, very strange sexuality, and bizarre hallucinations, and racial representations of ethnic groups that were hands down offensive to everybody across the board. Having grown up in the mean streets of the Bronx, Ralph Bakshi grew up in the Bronx. We're talking West Side Story, the Bronx, where, gangs were fighting with each other. At the same time, they were dancing with their fingers snapping together.
You're killing me.
I'm telling you, Ralph Bakshi was responsible for creating a beautiful and a very interesting fantasy film that was made with Frank Frazetta. It was called Fire and Ice. It was like a whole Frank Frazetta painting come to life. So, believe it or not, Mr. Ralph Bakshi did something that he really, really wanted to do because he was a Ringer fan. He was just a fan of the Lord of the Rings books. He was deeply in love with Tolkien and Tolkien's original stories. And he found out that John Boorman, the great director John Boorman, who created Excalibur, he had a 700-page draft of an adaptation of the Lord of the Rings. United Artists put the project in turnaround. United Artists would not take John Boorman's idea of condensing the entire Rings trilogy down into one film.
Okay.
Peter Jackson was not even on the horizon yet. He hadn't even come up as a filmmaker yet. Ralph Bakshi said to United Artists, "Let me do this. I'll do it in 2 films. Part 1, Part 2. And this was decades before Quentin Tarantino had given us the concept of Kill Bill Volume 1, immediately followed by Volume 2, where the audience knew that it was supposed to be a 2-chapter cinema experience. United Artists said to Ralph, "Okay, great. Do you want to take a look at John Boorman's script?" And he said, "No." He said, "I don't even want to see it. Take it away. Okay. Let me just do this on my own." There was a script by Chris Conkling. It was not very good because it told the story in flashback from Merry's point of view.
Okay.
Believe it or not, imagine the entire story of the Lord of the Rings, and you take Pippin aside and have only Merry Haddock Brandybuck tell the story in flashback of what he remembers of Frodo's journey. That was scrapped. Chris Conkling had that script right down there, and you know what Ralph Bakshi did? He said, "You, Peter S. Beagle, you wrote The Last Unicorn. Everyone in the fantasy world loves you. Please, come to this project and do a rewrite on the script."
Yes.
And that is why the great storyteller that we know and love, Peter S. Beagle, is the name on that screenplay. He rewrote the Lord of the Rings screenplay in 1978 for only $5,000 with the promise.
That's a lot of money.
No, back then it was a pittance. It was barely enough for
$5,000 for a screenplay that in 1978
for a major feature. A major feature that was they spent $4.5 million on the production budget, and they only gave Peter Beagle $5K. Something's wrong here. Do you know what Saul Zentz said? Saul Zentz promised Peter S. Beagle over and over again, "We'll give you more writing jobs, we'll give you more screenplays." Take a look at this. This is a lobby card. Back in the 70s, they still had these things. Lobby cards, where not a full-size one-sheet poster, but you'd go to the theater and look at a variety of lobby cards that were put in the poster case. So Peter Beagle rewrote the script, and then they put $4 million into this. Peter Beagle knew what they were doing, and so did David Carradine. Here's where it gets really good.
Wait, before you go there.
Come on.
We got a question.
You got a question.
If he did all those terrible movies, why was he doing the animated Lord of the Rings?
Because he had made money with his films. Although he had made, a name for himself with some notorious depiction of sex, drugs, and rock and roll in all of his films, to take on something serious, like an epic fantasy like this, the project was going to happen anyways. United Artists had the damn thing. They were working on it, but they kicked John Boorman out. They said, "You're not going to do it." Ralph said, "I'll do it, and I'll do it in this particular way that you're going to love." They said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I'm going to film live action footage with live actors, and I will do a rotoscoping process and something called posterization, so that this animation would create something no other animated film had ever done."
Cheaper.
No. It is an effect that Ralph wanted to create because he thought it was more visually interesting to have more animation in the composition.
But he pitched it as it was cheaper than hiring high-priced artists.
Yes, he did.
He pitched it as, we don't have to pay high-priced, really good artists for 2 years. Instead, we can just hire anybody that can trace.
That can trace. He also said you're going to have something in this animation that will look better and more visually dense. He was going for density, and that kind of stuff means instead of having 600 animators on your team spend a whole week just doing a room full of orcs or a big battlefield full of orcs, you can have the photography done to have more movement within the frame. More movement, more animation, with less process of animating it by hand. So it is a 2-for-1. You get more visual eye candy in this rotoscoping process, and it also looks more textured. There's a greater density to the colors and the images, and it looks more what he thought. He thought it looked more epic and more suitable. This was his great ambition. I'm not advocating that it worked. We know that the film is a mixed bag. The 1978 adaptation is very hot and cold. Some of it is a miserable mess. A lot of it is really psychedelic and really weird. Some of it, however, works so well and works so distinctly well as an adaptation of Tolkien. The reason why is because it's true to the script. The script is true to Tolkien's words. The dialogue that Peter Beagle put in the script is more direct and has more fidelity to Tolkien's original script. But here's the real kicker. This movie, as much of a mess as it is, was something that Peter Jackson liked so much, it turned him on to the story, and this is the movie that made Peter Jackson decide he would read the book in the first place.
Well, I disagree that I disagree that he was trying to do all this like magical stuff with animation. No.
Well, he's on the record saying that this was his intention.
I don't believe it.
The director said these things. I'm telling you what the director said.
I think after the fact, it's called revising history. The guy was a workhorse. Remember when we had John Kay?
I do remember.
The creator of Ren and Stimpy.
Yes, I do.
He used to work for Ralph Bakshi in his workshop of horrors. This guy was a slave driver of an animation director. He barely paid anything. He barely paid a living wage, and he ground his animators to the ground because they had no creative expression. It was just, we filmed it, trace what's on the film, add a little leaf, and call it a day. Now, at the time, if you remember, in the mid '70s, animation was all about this kind of loose form. Disney had just made a deal with Xerox. So for the first time in history, Walt Disney Animation was Xeroxing all of the original pencil drawings on a Xerox from the paper. They would Xerox it onto the transparency, and then they would apply the paint and color the thing.
Yes.
Previously, the drawing, the animators would draw, and then it would be sent to ink and paint, and the ink and paint would trace what the animators had drawn frame by frame. Well, with Xerox, they said, "Oh, we're going to do this faster and cheaper because we can just Xerox the drawing and just paint by numbers." So that's why if you look at the Jungle Book and the Aristocats and Robin Hood, it's got this sketch quality. If you notice, if
I have seen that, you'll notice that it looks as if there is like a tailing of the brush. You know,
yes.
when a wet brush is going across a canvas, and when the paint starts to run out in that application, and it creates that kind of surface, granular kind of texturing.
Yeah.
Well, that's something you do see in the 70s era. Jungle Book and Robin Hood.
So, and if you watch Jungle Book,
and you even see it
in Robin Hood,
and in the Black Cauldron, you even see it in the Fox and the Hound,
and the Rescuers.
Yes, you do see it there.
All the films from the 70s.
Yes.
Because it was Disney had died, and the company was kind of like in shambles. Nobody knew how to take care of Disney, and so they were cutting costs across the board. Like, we still have to make animated films. Because it's our bread and butter, and they were trying to make it cheaper. So the Xerox was like, you can make it cheaper by using Xerox, just Xerox. So when it came to Ralph Bakshi bidding on some of these things, now it wasn't that Tolkien was opposed. There's a whole nother discussion about Disney and Tolkien. But in the mid '70s,
that's another
when the
conversation.
Tolkien estate was broke, and he needed cash, they needed to make this movie. That's all there is to it. Tolkien had a bunch of kids and family members that needed to go to college, and the mortgage needed to be paid, and the dude was broke. So they sold the film rights. This movie was going to happen. It needed to happen because Tolkien needed the money. And so a lot of animation companies approached the Tolkien estate, MGM, I'm sorry, that had the thing United Artists, and we're like, we can do it cheaper. Oh, well, I can do it cheaper. Well, I can do it cheaper. And Ralph Bakshi comes in and says, guess what? I can do it cheapest. Because you know what I do? I just point a crappy old Super 8 camera at some actors in cosplay, and then we trace everything. So I can just hire any Joe Schmo off the street that knows how to pick up a pen, and I can just tell him to trace the frames. And so that's why you had things that look like this. There's very little design in these characters. These are actors that were in poor cosplay, that were traced by any amateur artist that had not worked that much in animation. Working for Ralph Bakshi was like your entry into the world of animation.
I think perhaps there might be a slight tendency towards exaggeration here in what you're saying, my dear boy, and I'm not sure that
he came in at the cheapest price.
I'm not sure.
Bakshi came in at the cheapest price.
I'm not sure that you're being entirely generous or accurate. The only game in town for getting the Lord of the Rings onto the silver screen was to do it in a way that would be financially viable to the studio. John Borman had attempted things that Stanley Kubrick had attempted, that the Beatles had attempted. They'd all attempted to do an adaptation, and everybody had said at the studio,
everyone had said it's unfilmable.
This isn't going to work. It's too expensive. This isn't going to work.
Unfilmable.
So if
so in comes this guy that says,
if somebody walks into your office and says I can do this, and shows you, looking at the historical record of Bakshi's other films, none of his previous films had attempted to do this type of rotoscoping in this particular way. Now, rotoscoping was invented in the 1920s or the late 1910s. It is something that had been done in animated shorts and in other film processing previous to Bakshi, but the way that Ralph did it for The Lord of the Rings was unique, very ambitious, and even though it cut all the costs out that United Artists was worried about, it did create something of an effective realism in the world of abstract animation. Animation always gets a cutting edge over live action, to me, because of the level of abstraction that lets us look at these characters and feel and respond to them, even though they're not human. Look at Finding Nemo, for example. Looking at the fish,
that's quality artists put.
You have it's not. You're talking about animation as an art form, allowing the abstraction of the art form itself to make the narrative believable. There is no entry point into Finding Nemo if you used perfectly photorealistic fish that looked exactly like real fish instead of being slightly cartoonized.
And that's what they tried to do with Bakshi's Lord of the Rings.
This picture of Elrond half-elven.
Elrond?
That is Elrond sitting and presiding over the Council of Elrond. That is Elrond presiding over the Council of Elrond.
Okay,
moving on to the next.
Who is this?
There's Legolas speaking to Sam with a wounded Frodo as they are leaving Weathertop on their way to the fords of Bruinen. On the far right side, there is Aragorn himself. Yes. Now, character design is one thing. You've got character designs like Theoden, Grima, Wormtongue, and there's Éowyn in the back. The character designs you can complain about all day, but the effectiveness of his...
I kind of like Éowyn as an older lady.
I don't like Éowyn. She looks like a really bad drag queen in that shot.
You agree with me. We're in violent agreement.
We're not in agreement. Hey, I can complain about how Gollum doesn't look right or how the character designs don't look right. But I can also
the only reason Bakshi got this job
I can
is
also
because he came
insist on finishing my sentence. Bakshi should be given some modicum, a little modicum of credit for the ambitious idea of saying, I'm creating a fantasy world, but why don't I try to make it as realistic as possible? Therefore, you get posterized photography shots of people in costumes. Star Wars fans, take note. That Legolas that we just had up, let's have that Legolas up again. That Legolas, his voice was provided by none other than Anthony Daniels, C-3PO. Other famous actors have appeared in Ralph Bakshi's films, not the least of which, Aragorn. His voice was provided by the legendary John Hurt. John Hurt, who you know and love as Ollivander from the Harry Potter films, and of course, the Elephant Man. The greatest role he ever played.
Wait, was he in Indiana Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
Nope, John Hurt was not in any Indiana Jones film.
Okay.
But he was also in Contact with Matthew McConaughey and Jodie Foster, and he's notably the evil villain, the Prime Minister, in V for Vendetta. John Hurt is in so many great films, and hey, look, you know what? There it is. Go back to that fireplace shot of Frodo and Gandalf. Of all the character designs in Bakshi's Lord of the Rings films, these two characters are probably the most successful. Frodo looks like a very, very acceptable version of Frodo, a character that even if you dislike the film, you will feel sympathy for Frodo, the way he's characterized, and Gandalf, I think, is the single most effective character design. But there are problems in the script, many noticeable problems. I'll give Peter Beagle credit for sticking close to Tolkien.
Okay, problems in the
but
script.
there are some unique problems with the script. I
Problems
have
with
to
the
say.
script and cheap animation. So going back to your thing, like, oh, it's a shame that Peter Beagle only got 5,000. I'm like, that's what this movie had for budget. I don't think he got shortchanged at all. There were problems with the script. He got paid what he had to based on the budget that was given, and Bakshi came in with the cheapest budget. He's like, I get whatever you have, give it to me. And they're like, we can't give you any more than this. He's like, I'll take it. And
You don't know that for sure.
I've done so much research.
I have too.
In
fact, I just appeared on a script-to-screen podcast over this weekend.
Well, did you look at
We talked about this for 2.5 hours.
Well, did you talk about how this Lord of the Rings was at San Diego Comic-Con?
This Lord of the Rings was at San Diego Comic-Con in the 70s.
Yes.
This Lord of the Rings was nominated for the Nebula Award. It was nominated for the Hugo Award for best.
Because there wasn't a lot of competition. I gotta say,
because it was the only game in town.
And it was the first time that they ever brought it to the screen. Look, I'm not. I commend the fact that a filmmaker was able to go through and bring it to the big screen. I think that's what everybody was commending. This book, Tolkien's work was unfilmable. The Lord of the Rings was unfilmable.
Here it is.
And you can back that up. Through the history of film, they always said that was unfilmable. Bakshi and Beagle made it filmable. They made a film, and it released, and it was great.
And
it was good.
It made a lot of money.
And it made a lot of money.
$4.5 million production budget. It made about 31. If you round up, almost 31 million, and that kind of return on their investment was
made it one of the most successful animated films of all time.
One of the most successful animated films of the 70s, and it certainly surprised everyone. But here's the thing. It was on the cover of Reader's Digest when I was a 10-year-old. When I was 10 years old, going to see this movie, take a look. Let's go back to... keep going. We've got... No. Go back to the ring wraiths there. There are certain moments in Ralph Bakshi's film that Peter Jackson was so impressed with, he recreated them. For example, the ring wraiths are really, really quite effective. I don't think the Battle of Helm's Deep, the way it's portrayed in the film, works. It's kind of clunky and weird, but the ring wraiths are very much a threat, and they're great the way they're designed, and the way they're... and there's a taut, really tension-filled standoff between the Witch King and Frodo as they approach the ford of Bruinen before the floodwaters come and flood the Nazgul away. But in this scene in Bree, in the Prancing Pony, the way that Ralph handles this shot, he shows a bird's eye view over the top of the room, there's no one in the room, and then he does a simple crossfade, and mysteriously, as if they were invisible, the ring wraiths appear in the room out of a crossfade. They're all crippled, hunched over with the evil of their evilness, making their arms and elbows and knuckles all twisted. It's almost impossible for these ring wraiths to hold their bloody swords.
Those outfits are fierce.
They show up and they just stab the what you think are the bodies of the hobbits. And it's a very interesting scene. There's no shrieking like you get Fran Walsh with her keynote kind of shriek. That is, but these ring wraiths go, and they make these like disgusting gargling and wretched sounds as if they can barely breathe. The scene where all the four hobbits are hiding under the tree root, that big tree root scene is shot for shot recreated by Peter Jackson. Oh, I don't have that here. Maybe I do in this whole list of images. That's a shot from Wizards. Wizards was another interesting film.
This isn't even Lord of the Rings? Moving on.
Nope, that's not Lord of the Rings. But
is this Lord of the Rings?
That's Treebeard holding Merry and Pippin.
Treebeard.
The Treebeard design is very much criticized, and rightly so, as looking like a giant gray carrot that's walking around.
Did Bakshi use John Howe and Alan Lee's artwork back then?
I'm sorry?
Did Bakshi use John Howe and Alan Lee's artwork?
No. Bakshi was inspired by a couple of other artists in this Frank Frazetta age. John Howe and Alan Lee had not made a name for themselves in the fantasy art world at this time.
They were still up and coming.
They were.
And you can see that this is definitely who Frazetta. This is very much a Frazetta.
Very Frazetta inspired. This Balrog with his membranous bat wings and his lion's head. Really goofy design for the Balrog. It doesn't work. It's not very threatening. But you have got a lot of pluses and minuses in this Ralph Bakshi film. When there's tension and there's a tense standoff between people and characters, Bakshi will do a tight close-up of a person's face, and then he'll do a wide shot. Well, where did Peter Jackson learn how to do tight, intimate close-up of someone and then go to a wide shot, which Peter Jackson does over and over and over again? He learned it from Bakshi. There is Celeborn and the Lady Galadriel. No, it's not exactly.
Wide shot?
Lady Galadriel and Celeborn, I like their character designs.
They're married.
Very 70s. It's kind of cool. And then we get to go see the Mirror of Galadriel.
She has an affair with Gandalf.
And she uses the exact same dialogue that Cate Blanchett uses, but she doesn't have like psychedelic freak out. She just kind of...
The world is psychedelic.
She just twirls her dress around and says, instead of a dark lord, and she twirls her dress in a circle and says, you would put up a queen. And it kind of looks like the bit from The Sound of Music where Julie Andrews is twirling on the mountaintop. It's kind of funny, but the greatest success of the film...
This guy looks like he's in Scooby-Doo.
He
now
does.
Let's pull off that mask and see who you really
Where's
are.
that true villain? The greatest success of Ralph Bakshi's film... that is it. That is the greatest success of Ralph Bakshi's film. This board game is the coolest thing in the universe. All of you geeks out there in Geekland, show me that again. Bring that back. This thing is worth its weight in gold. It's worth its weight in platinum, uranium. It's worth its weight.
Gold.
It is worth its weight in helium-3, the most valuable spice in the universe.
I'll give you $1.
Go to Arrakis. Go to Dune. Even a bucket of spice from Dune is not as valuable as this board game. Let me tell you guys, Geek Central, the coolest and the most fun board game you'll ever play, that one, from the now defunct board game company Milton Bradley. You could pick any of the 9 members of the Fellowship. It's a cutthroat adventure game, a race to the finish. The board game design is the map of Middle-earth, from Bag End all the way down to Mount Doom, done in an unusual hex grid. A hex grid, it's very interesting. You guys will love that. If you can find that board game on eBay, find it, love it, treasure it. There was actually limited merchandising that came out. There was some action figures. This is the backside of
This is the original sideshow.
This is the backside of the one of the action figures. I don't know if it was Frodo or Gollum, and it showed all the toys that were available in the toy line that United Artists had released. There was a Ringwraith horse and a really cool Ringwraith. There was a white horse. It was not Shadowfax. Shadowfax isn't even mentioned in this. There's a white horse that Glorfindel rides, but Glorfindel is replaced by Legolas in the film. And keep going, we've got more toys. There's the Gollum action figure.
I'd buy that for $1.
I had a disagreement with this these excellent people I did the podcast with, Benjamin and Chris. They loved Gollum and the way Gollum was provided a voice by Peter Woodthorpe. And I don't think that this Gollum in the Bakshi film, I don't think he works at all. He's very fey, very effeminate, very silly, and not threatening at all. I have a couple of more toys. We've got some more images. How many more good... the poster. Look at this one sheet. One of our chatters...
I think that was designed by Bakshi himself.
That one sheet is a beautiful, beautiful one sheet. It's very interesting, and it has a familiar tagline, and one of the chatters in the chat room was saying, "Oh, wasn't that a direct quote from Tolkien?" And the answer is no, it was not a direct quote from Tolkien, but it is here on the poster. A single dream is more powerful than 1,000 realities. An excellent tagline for the Bakshi Lord of the Rings, but that was not a quote from Tolkien at all. And yeah, poor Glorfindel. He always gets replaced in every film. Peter Jackson replaced Glorfindel with Arwen, and then Bakshi replaced Glorfindel with Legolas, voiced by C-3PO.
Redundant.
This is the best toy of them all. The Ringwraith. The Ringwraith designs were very Frazetta inspired. Look at the album cover for Molly Hatchet that Frazetta famously did. Look at all this Frazetta stuff, and you'll see the influence here. The Ringwraith design is super cool. And there was even a bank. There was a coloring book. There was a plastic coin bank for Ralph Bakshi's film. And there was the board game. This is the most interesting thing of all.
Oh my goodness.
And this leads me to the story about David Carradine. Any of you guys who have seen my documentary film, Ringers, Lord of the Fans, then you know that we had an interview with David Carradine not long before he died, his very untimely death. David Carradine talks about all the footage that they shot with the actors in their costumes. Here's Gandalf, Boromir in the center, and Aragorn on the left. They went to Spain. They had an entire crew. They had costumes, they had horses, they had battle gear and weapons.
At Spain prices, again.
And they shot this footage in Spain.
And then they said, trace this.
And
this was barrel budget, bottom of the barrel budget animation.
Listen to this guy. That's a shot, one of the rarest of rare behind-the-scenes shots. When David Carradine found out that this movie was being made, he wanted to be in it. And he wanted to play Strider, also known as Aragorn. So,
also known as the Ranger. Also known as
Elisar Tel Kontar. Also known as is Elisar? Yeah. Hope. And
also known as Husboy.
Also known as Elendil. Elendil and King Elisar.
Tolkien claims more names than gang members do.
Aragorn was something that David Carradine thought was an excellent role, a role that he wanted. So he pulled a Sean Young, and he goes rampaging down there to the studio lot, and he goes knocking up on Ralph Bakshi's office door and says, "Here I am. I'm here to petition you to play the role of Aragorn," which is what Tim Burton had to deal with. When Tim Burton was making his sequel to Batman, he was creating Batman Returns, and he was going to put the Penguin and Catwoman in the Batman sequel. Sean Young shows up on the Warner Brothers set, famously dressed in her cockamamie homemade Catwoman costume. And she bursts into Tim Burton's offices, crawling around on all fours, going, "Brrr, meow, I'm Selena Kyle," trying to convince Tim Burton that she was the right woman to play the role of Catwoman.
That's crazy. That's like Elijah Wood making his own costume and going up into the Santa Monica Mountains and doing his own video. That's so crazy.
It's a tall story, but it's a true story.
That's what actors do.
David Carradine went into Ralph Bakshi's office to petition him that he should be Aragorn in the film. Then David finds out that this live-action stuff was being shot, and David tries to convince Ralph not to do any rotoscoping and not to do any animation at all, that he should just stick with the live-action footage only. However, none of his petitioning worked. Ralph did not cast David Carradine in the film. Sorry to say. It would have been a very interesting job for David to get. And it's very, very interesting. My favorite shot from the whole Ralph Bakshi film, this iconic image when we're in the Mirror of Galadriel scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in
And Frodo
in
says,
Bakshi.
"Here, I will offer you the ring." And you see a lot of shots and a lot of things that Peter Jackson was quite happy to use as an homage to Ralph. And
There's a lot
it's
of
very
shots
interesting.
in Bakshi's Lord of the Rings that Peter Jackson copied.
He did, and it stands the test of time in that sense.
You know, a lot of
These
people
visual imagery lasts forever in these films.
A lot of people say that Elijah Wood's Frodo looks
Estelle.
a lot like Bakshi's Frodo, and this is true. We do know that when he got the part, Elijah Wood had not read Lord of the Rings. His only exposure to Lord of the Rings was this animated film from Ralph Bakshi.
That's right.
So Elijah
That's
Wood
right. That's right.
created a costume based on the cartoon character that you see right here.
Yes, this
and
Frodo.
he went up in the Santa Monica Mountains with
Yes.
his buddy's camera. They filmed an audition. Peter Jackson cast him. Peter Jackson made a costume officially for the movie that is based on this Bakshi vision. So basically, one could say that Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings
Bye, Rocket. Thank you for joining us.
is Peter Jackson's kind of pre-production edition.
Sure.
Like you can watch
Sure,
the whole movie
yeah.
and say, "Yep, that's going to be in the movie." Like, "Yep, that's in the movie."
Someone just tweeted us. This is really fantastic. He's got, hello James. Thank you, James. I know you're watching the show. He did a Kickstarter donation to a new project that Ralph Bakshi is doing called Last Days of Coney Island.
Yes.
And as a reward, he got this excellent original animation cell where Mary is being challenged by the ringwraiths in the streets of Bree.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. Look, see, there's Mary.
Yeah.
Very cool. And that's an original animation cell. I'm so glad you tweeted that to us. That's really cool, man. Thank you, James, for showing us
Now,
that.
what are these photos from?
Live action, behind the scenes Polaroids of the Riders of Rohan on horseback and the production crew in Spain. This is a shot where they were filming out in Spain. Excuse me. And this was before any of it was rotoscoped. And it's very interesting to see. These behind-the-scenes shots are very, very rare indeed. And I gotta admit, the whole Bakshi Lord of the Rings thing is a mess from the narrative point of view because it never finishes the story. At the Battle of Helm's Deep, suddenly they win victory for our heroes, and then abruptly the film is over. United Artists screwed the pooch very badly. They ruined it for Ralph Bakshi because they promised him that all the marketing and all the posters would say Part 1. So that everybody would know, everybody in the audience would be aware, this is Chapter 1, we're going to see Chapter 2 when they make it next. Which is a marketing strategy everyone loves nowadays. Oh yeah, Harry Potter.
Yeah,
we're going to make Part 1, Part 2. Everyone's happy to do that now, but back then, they lied to the director, and United Artists put the movie out without any indication,
Things
and
changed.
audiences were shocked. They're like, that's it? Such an abrupt end? How bizarre. And everybody was aggravated, they were pissed off, and it was just so crazy that they did that to him, and it fell on him. It fell on the director. Everybody thought that he was the goof that had made this bad mistake. You know? It's fascinating. Take a look at this. In this old Leonard Maltin's movie guide, here's the little abbreviated movie review of Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. It says here, an ambitious animated version of Tolkien's fantasy saga covers 1.5 books of the trilogy, ending rather abruptly. Story of different races in Middle-earth competing for ownership of all-powerful rings. Well, that's wrong. Nobody's competing for ownership of different magical rings. It's just so wrong. And then it says here, this story is inspired and exciting, but it begins to drag and confuse during the last hour. Bakshi's technique awkwardly combines animation and live-action tracings, remade by Peter Jackson in 2001. Well, the reviewers in that little book are confused because no one in the movie is trying to compete for ownership of these bloody rings. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it does
They didn't
look
even
weird.
they didn't even put a to be continued at the end of the film. They didn't even say Frodo and Sam will continue their quest in Lord of the Rings Part 2. They just had a voiceover that said, "And here ends the first chapter of the Lord of the Rings." That's all it said. Fade to black, movie was over.
But here's the big picture. Here's
So weird that they did that to
No,
him.
it-
They made him look bad.
No, this film took over 3 years to make, and during those 3 years, a lot of things changed. We got a new president, Jimmy Carter. Disney animation was failing. Robin Hood was a failure at the box office. The Aristocats was a failure at the box office. Rescuers didn't do as well. In fact, like after Robin Hood
Yeah.
in 1978, I think it was, that Disney didn't have an animated hit for 10 years. So,
Yep.
so MGM,
Yeah, the Black Cauldron was a disaster. It was in such a mess.
huge disaster.
It was such a mess. What's his name? The guy who took over Disney Studio in the late 70s and 80s. Michael
yeah, something like
Eisner?
that. No,
Yeah, Mike Eisner came into the animation studio and said, "Let's take a look at what you've got here on the Black Cauldron." And he personally sat down with the editor and he chopped it up and changed a whole bunch of stuff and made the film even worse than what it was. And at that time, there was a mass exodus. Don Bluth, one of our favorite animators.
well, this was before then.
Oh, I mean, The Fox and the Hound was before The Black Cauldron. This is true. And at the time when Don Bluth and his team of animators were working on Fox and the Hound, they were getting really, really aggravated with Disney trying to cut corners and do stupid things like that.
They were
And so-
cutting corners because these movies weren't performing at the box
They
office.
weren't,
So in the 3 years that it took to make the Lord of the Rings animated film, that the marketplace had changed.
Yep.
Every animated film was failing,
Yes.
and rightly so, and prudently, United Artists said, we can't guarantee a sequel. Every single movie is failing. The darker the movie, the bigger the fail. And this movie is dark. Lord of the Rings is dark. So the darker the movie, the bigger the fail. And they're like, we can't do a sequel. We won't do a sequel. There's no way. There's no way this thing's going to make money. We're just going to have to put it out and work hard to make our money back. So it was total prudent business sense based on everything that was happening in
Perhaps.
in the marketplace.
Perhaps. But how interesting is it that nowadays, every movie studio would love to take a movie, split it into 2 volumes, and then make the audience go to see it twice to see the whole story.
That's
Back
different.
then, it was considered absurd that you would do part 1 of a story, then part 2 of a story. Nowadays, it's de rigueur. It's everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's happy to say, "Oh yeah, Hunger Games. Well, we'll take that 3rd movie and we'll split it into 2 parts." They did it to Harry Potter. They're doing it to Hunger Games. Quentin Tarantino stepped onto the stage in grand style and said, "You're going to get Volume 1 of Kill Bill. Then you'll get Volume 2 when I feel like
You know what?
it
If
next
we're going
year."
to credit the people that started this whole trend, it was the Wachowskis with The Matrix 2 and 3.
You think?
Absolutely. They were the first ones to
think?
do. We're going to do 2 sequels at the same time. We're going to
All
release
right.
them
Okay,
in
yeah,
the same
agreed,
year.
agreed. Okay, you're
And-
right. Justin, I agree with you for once. You have pinpointed, this was an industry change. Universal, not Universal, why do I keep saying that? United Artists really screwed over Bakshi because they were understandably afraid
They didn't
of what
screw anybody over.
They
Every
promised him. They
movie
promised
was
him.
failing.
they promised him. We will release this film saying Lord of the Rings Part 1. And without the director's consent or even his knowledge, they released it. Here's the whole
Because
Lord of the Rings.
every
Enjoy.
cartoon, it's worse to make a promise that you don't keep than to just kind of
It
button
was-
that up.
It was worse for a 10-year-old Tolkien fan like me, who paid money to sit in the theater. I was there in the movie house watching Bakshi's film. when it
you're
was
bitter.
over,
You're
when it
bitter.
was over,
40 years
I was
later.
just as pissed off at the end of Bakshi's film,
my gosh.
not finishing the story properly, as I was aggravated with the Desolation of Smaug,
I see what
not
you're doing
ending
here.
the narrative. It leads up to that. If you do not end the narrative of your third act with the proper resolution that makes the audience feel like the story is really being told, you are disappointing your audience, and you're really screwing things up as a filmmaker. But there you go. I'm just saying. If I had seen end of part 1, I would have been more excited to see more Lord of the Rings in the next year or two. I would have loved that. I would have loved it.
I couldn't watch it. These
final-
guys scared me.
Oh, the ring wraiths are very effectively
Wonderful.
effectively
scary.
realized. Do you know what?
Wonderful. Scary.
The
Wonderful.
thing about Ralph Bakshi's film,
Scary.
he did not depict any of the orcs or Saruman or any of the villains in any way that was effective, but he did successfully depict the ring wraiths, and they were rather effective throughout all of his. And then that's what I have to say.
And that's why I think that the first Lord of the Rings film, Fellowship of the Ring from Peter Jackson, the ring wraiths are freaking scary, and you almost have to wonder that Peter Jackson kind of needs a playbook to execute a good movie. Like he needs to do a full run through of a feature film
Yes.
to get it right.
Well, the worst crime that was foisted upon Tolkien fans back in the 70s was not the Rankin and Bass animated Hobbit. I love that stuff. The fact that United Artists was so uncertain about audience response to Lord of the Rings, they forced Bakshi to change Saruman, drop the letter S, and they referred to him as Aruman, because they were afraid audiences would be confused between Sauron and Saruman. So in many occasions in Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, yeah, go Meltdown, for real. Hey, does Meltdown have any old Bakshi merchandise?
Nope.
Probably.
Nobody wants
You
it.
do have...
But we did a signing with him a while back, and it was amazing.
Amazing, yeah. Ralph Bakshi has appeared right here. What an adrenaline rush. Here to have Ralph in person, doing signings, a big event for all the fans. I tell you what, calling the character Aruman because you thought the audience was going to be confused,
That's
United Artists handled it so poorly. Imagine how much worse it would have been if John Borman had gone ahead and made his single film Lord of the Rings live action. How much worse would it have been? The way that UA was handling the stuff. My frustration. Let it be known. Final word about Bakshi.
I'm sorry, this whole episode is like a purging of...
It is a purging of my feelings
40 years
about this 1978 film. The very best movie, I think the most successful movie that Ralph ever made, was American Pop. It is very interesting. It covers and traces
avant-garde.
all of American musical styles
It's avant-garde.
from the arrival of a Russian Jewish immigrant family arriving at Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty and the birth of jazz and the great advent of jazz music in New York City in the Roaring 20s, and then it generationally moves through time to see different aspects of American music going through folk and rock and then psychedelic. By the end of the movie, you get to Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band and some other great stuff. I think the Tubes have a song at the end of American Pop. Check it out. It's a really cool movie, and I think it'll
Is it
take...
Bakshi's best work?
It's
Better
his
than
best
Lord
work.
of the Rings?
Yep. American Pop...
Above Lord of the Rings?
Yes, American Pop is a very successful directing effort. I'm talking about the narrative and the directing and the artistic approach. American Pop, I think, is a great success. Anyways, that's just my opinion on all that. Did you ever see it?
No.
You'd enjoy it. It's quite good.
I didn't like that style of
And then-
animation.
and then
it's
the-
creepy.
And then the biggest disaster that Bakshi ever did was really Cool World. The biggest epic fail. Not even Brad Pitt and Gabriel Byrne and a delicious and salacious blonde, buxom,
But you can see what he was doing there.
what's her name? Kim Basinger. Not even Kim Basinger, in all of her buxomness, could save Cool World. It was a big old mess. Anyways,
it had potential, but
Cool
it
World.
was a mess.
Cool
Yeah,
World had potential.
It's
just a mess.
The theories,
It's just a mess.
the storytelling, what they were trying to do had potential. It's kind of like the Cool World's kind of like the Matrix.
Thank you, Sheepish Lion. Thank you, Sheepish
the
Lion,
second and
for
third
that.
Matrix had potential, and they were just kind of muddled with.
Yep. Here you go. Some of our fans are in agreement. Look at this. Thank you so much for focusing on Bakshi's film today.
Hello, I'm Othmog.
I'm a big fan of Ralph's.
Oromir.
Listen, I'm a big fan of Ralph's work, despite how challenging it is. You can't watch an auteur without being.
Auteur?
He's an auteur.
Look at
There's
that word.
no other
That's
word about
auteur
it.
right there.
Bakshi is an auteur. He is a unique talent.
Yes.
And you will be challenged by a lot of the weirdness and the idiosyncrasies of Ralph Bakshi, because that's just who he is. That's how it is. But for you guys who are back in the 70s and the 80s, you like heavy metal? Remember that movie, Heavy
Yep.
Metal? Isn't that a gas? Everyone loves heavy metal. If you like heavy metal, definitely check out Ralph's other film, Fire and Ice, and above all, look at Wizards. Wizards is very interesting.
So, you know,
Very
he
interesting.
was a budget filmmaker. The reason he could do all these animated films on a budget, and not many people could, you didn't see Warner Brothers putting out any feature film Bugs Bunnies or anything, is because, you know, he had this process. It was not patented, but he had this process of creating costumes or renting costumes from the movie studio. You know, the deal he would make is like, let me have access to your old wardrobe department. And he'd go in and find these big furs that the musicals used to do, and stuff like that. And then he'd film it all, and then go back and just trace over it and put them in a place like this. You know, it's like that was actually, you know, a couple folding chairs and stuff like that. So, you know, he had a process.
Such a bitch today, Justin. You are
he
such
had
a
a process of doing this. Yeah, but that's how these films are made.
I love you, man.
That's
I love you. I love you to pieces.
That's all I'm saying.
I love you.
All I want to say was that that's how these films were made. And people think that rotoscoping is a lost art form. 95% of all Hollywood films released today, 2014, use rotoscoping. In fact, that's basically all the Marvel films. Any effects-driven film, whether it's Godzilla or Marvel, especially Marvel, all they do is they film these actors on set, either on set or on a green screen, and then you have to rotoscope them out. And then oftentimes they just completely erase the person and put a digital double over the other person. So you're basically rotoscoping actor's original actions, and then turning it into an animated character,
like Gollum or Azog,
not
like
Gollum
motion
or
capture.
Azog, like Captain America flying through the air. Like he'll do the jump, and then at that frame, then you stop rotoscoping, and then it goes into digital Captain America, and he continues the super jump, and he throws his shield, and then they'll film, you know, and then he'll go back here, and they go, and then he'll stop and go, and so if you want to get a job in Hollywood, the best way you can do is no Photoshop, and go into rotoscoping. It's the highest in-demand job in Hollywood. There's more rotoscope artists employed around the world than any other job in Hollywood.
Indeed.
There's at least 60, 70,000 people employed as rotoscope artists. You can get jobs in Vancouver, India, Singapore, San Francisco, LA, Toronto,
That's fascinating.
London.
That is fascinating. I didn't realize that.
Bakshi was ahead of the game when he's doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
He was all rotoscoping. All these.
Now, hold on. Now, some of that, you see that shot of Gandalf the White? That is not just rotoscoping. That is called posterization. This is posterizing
of the horse, but the character
This is
drawn.
fully posterizing of live photography, where, you know, they did the Xeroxing and added 2D cell paint on a clear cell for this, but it didn't require tracing or redrawing of the image. It is actually the image reproduced on the cell from the photograph. And so there's lots of things going on in Bakshi's work. There's traditional 2D, hand-painted, pencil and ink, traditional. Then there's also rotoscoping, which you see a lot of, and then there was posterizing, especially when you watch Frodo dancing on top of the table at the Prancing Pony Inn, and he's singing, the Man in the Moon song before a crowd of people who have their flagons and they've got their flasks and they're drinking and making merry. But all those people, the denizens of the Prancing Pony, are all photography, and they've been posterized with just color over them, and they still look like photography, where Frodo looks like a 2D animated cell character. It is jarring sometimes, it is kind of awkward, but it's never dull. It's never really dull. The only thing I have to really complain about, above everything, is that Ralph did not give us a Samwise that was worthy of the character Samwise. It is the worst character design ever. Sam looks like a pudgy potato that has like a disease, and he was, it was Billy Barty, one of our favorite little people, from Time Bandits and all these other great movies we love Billy Barty in, Legend. Billy Barty, one of our favorite little people actors, he did Samwise, and the Samwise character is just so sloppy and so weird looking that you cannot ever imagine any heroism being ascribed to the character. For example, Sam against a giant spider, Shelob. Well, that particular character, the way that Sam's portrayed in Bakshi's film, you would never, ever in a million years expect that character with his floppy little arms. He looks like, Chewie. Chewie had too much to drink on the Chelsea Lately show, and that Samwise is a Samwise that would never, ever cut the mustard in the heroism department. He would never, ever cut the mustard.
So,
anyways,
well, that's a look back at Bakshi. I hope you've purged.
I have
all the energy.
That was very cathartic. It was a nice catharsis.
To get out.
Wonderful to talk about it. You guys are awesome. Thank you for joining us. It's been a really wonderful hour and a half. And watch this very same place next week, next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, for more Hobbit news and rumors. And still, no production diary.
What? We won't get any more.
We're not getting any production diaries.
No.
Oh, well.
Those were done a year and a half ago.
All right, you guys, be good to yourselves. Stay cool in the hot summer heat, or the Indian summer, as it continues to be blazing hot here. Lots of love to you from TheOneRing.net. Good night and good luck.